Hey everybody, Ryan here at eTrailer. Today on our 2022 Chevy Colorado, we're going to be showing you how to install the Roadmaster Automatic Battery Disconnect switch. But before we do that, why don't we check this out and figure out why it's a good idea to use something like this with your flat tow setup. When it comes to setting up a flat tow, there's already several different components that you need to worry about hooking up and stuff. And while everything's pretty simple, anything we can do to streamline it is well worth it, in my opinion. And it seems like a lot of people are concerned about that. They want something that is foolproof, pretty much. Super easy to set up, super easy to get going, and doesn't leave a lot of room to make mistakes and take up a bunch of your time. And so what this battery disconnect switch is going to do is really help simplify things and allow you to have the confidence knowing that your setup's right, and you're not going to damage anything or anything along those lines. So what this thing is going to do is it's going to allow you to push a button, automatically disconnect the battery. And it works opposite too. Whenever you're ready to reconnect it, you hit a button. And with the Chevy Colorado, the manufacturer says you need to have the battery disconnected whenever you're flat towing it. And so that really leaves you with a couple of options, right? Use something like this automatic battery disconnect, or get underneath the hood every time you want to flat tow it, disconnect the battery. Probably have to, maybe wrap up the cable end a little bit so it doesn't vibrate and end up touching the battery again. And then do that whenever you're ready to hook the battery back up and back and forth. And honestly, if you're like me, I would probably say right off the bat, I'll just do that. It's not that big of a deal. I can see it getting old real quick, and you're out trying to enjoy yourself. You're not trying to work on cars and pop the hood and get tools out and everything else. So with this, it's foolproof, right? You can't really mess it up. So essentially, if I turn our key forward, the car will work like it should. You could start it, horn works, radio works, everything's going, right? Whenever you're ready to flat tow and you need to disconnect the battery, you simply push this button and it cuts everything. So you no longer have power inside of here. You can't turn the truck over, nothing works. All right, exactly how we want it. And then when you get to where you're going, you want to start the truck, go for cruise, whatever, simply just push that button again. And then the truck takes a second or two to kind of wake up and think. And once it does, we have our gauges back, our lights are back on. We have our horn going, we can start the truck up. And so that's really all there is to it. So, you can really see how this beats having to mess around and unhook stuff from the battery every single time, as opposed to just pushing a button and being done with it. Other than that though, at the end of the day, is this a component that's absolutely necessary? No, it's not. But does it make life a lot easier? Absolutely. So to me, going through the trouble to set up a whole flat tow anyway, this kind of completes the package, at least in my opinion. As far as getting this installed goes, it's really not too bad. There's a handful of wires you got to hook up, but if you're already tackling everything else, it's really not too bad. So it shouldn't take up a bunch of your time or give you too many issues. But if you'd like to see how that is done, feel free to follow along. We'll go ahead, pull into the garage, and hook it up together now. To beginner installation, we're going to be here on the driver's side of our truck, and we have the front fascia removed, and that's because we're doing this at the same time that we're doing our base plate and everything else, which is definitely what I suggest. But with that said, we're first going to mount up the actual battery disconnect solenoid. So in our opening here, this is where we have it bolted up. So that's it right there. And there is actually a brace, a factory brace right here. I pulled the bolt out using a 10mm, put the battery disconnect solenoid over it, and simply just bolted it right back down. Didn't worry about putting one on the other side just because, it's not really necessary. This isn't going to go anywhere. But with that said, all of our wires, with the exception of the white one, just get pushed straight through that way into the engine compartment. The white one is a ground, and it turns out if you follow that down right here, we actually have a factory ground attachment there. So crimped on a ring terminal, pulled out this bolt here with a 10mm, slid this over it, and simply tighten this down. So now in the engine compartment, here's where our big battery cables run. And there's a gray wire as well that, we'll get to that in a moment. We'll focus on our battery wires now. But one of them will be labeled battery post, and the other one will be labeled battery cable. So originally, this factory deal here was connected to this post there, and I removed the nut using a 13mm, put the one that says battery cable, and connected it to that post there. This one we can then connect to the wire that says battery post, and we're going to lock these together like that. So before you do that though, take the big piece of heat shrink they give you, put that over one end of the wire, and then we're going to take this here bolt and a star washer, put the other end of the cable through there, take another star washer, and then the nut get this started, and then we'll come back with a 1/2" socket and wrench. We'll crank this down. Sure it's tight. And you can take that heat shrink, put this over it, and then I can go grab my heat gun and seal up the ends. So I'm using a heat gun to seal this up, and that'll help keep everything protected. So all that's left to do now for our battery disconnect is the gray wire coming off of our solenoid. So this is going to run inside of the cab. And so I simply just have it ran along the side of our battery and then in through a hole in the firewall that I have drilled out to run all of our wires through there anyway for our braking system and some of our other flat tone components, but it goes right in through there and down to our floorboard. So now inside of the truck, our gray wire is going to get hooked up to this button. And so I have that fixed up on our dash here. And this dash panel just pops out. There may be a couple 7mm head screws down on the bottom edge you have to pull out, but this will pop out. And what I've done is drilled a small hole in the panel where I wanted to mount it, put the switch through, tighten down the set screw on the back of it, and then right here there'll be no room for that switch to go through, and so you can either cut this off. I just lined it up and used a hole saw to drill a hole through it, that way our switch could pass through this little metal piece. It's pretty thin, it's almost like a 10, pretty easy to cut. But then this gray wire, if you cut the sheathing off, it's going to turn into two wires, a red one and a black one. And so you strip back the insulation on those, put them through the terminals there, and simply tighten them down. And once this is all hooked up, what we can do is put the fuse in the fuse holder and then simply test everything out to make sure that it's working properly. If you're looking for the fuse holder, it's going to be right next to the solenoid that we have mounted up here in the engine compartment, and you'll take the included 7.5 amp fuse, go ahead and pop that in, which I have done, and now what we can do is push the button inside of our truck to make sure everything's working. So right now the battery should be off or in the disconnected position there. And so just a quick test, we're hitting our horn, turning the key on, we've got nothing. So now if we hit this button, we should have power. So you hit it, car kind of wakes up for a second. We've got a horn, we can turn the key, and the dash lights up. Everything is functioning like it should. So it looks like we're in good shape. I'll go ahead and just turn the button off though to be the safe side. And we've got nothing again. So I think it's safe to say that our battery disconnect is working properly. And that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the Roadmaster Automatic Battery Disconnect switch on our 2022 Chevrolet Colorado.